Hey there, so this video is going to talk about a way to kind of organize in a sequential order the various vertebral levels, sympathetic and parasympathetic innervation to major viscera in the body. So first I start with the vertebral levels. So you have T1 to T4, T1 to T5, T2 to T7, T2 to T8, T5 to T9, T10 to T11. I put a star there because we'll use that twice. T12 to L2. Star for that one as well. Then you have T10. We're going back to T10. And then T10 to T11. T10 to L2. T11 to L2, T12, T12 to L1, T12 to L2. So hopefully you can see the pattern that went on there. So this one and this one, they both have the stars because they come up again right here and then right here. Okay, so the next thing to do is to draw what they're innervating. So we'll use green. So starting from head to toe, you have head and neck, then the heart, then you will have the lungs, and then you have the esophagus and the arms. I underline the arms, and once we get to the legs, I underline that as well. Just some visual things to remember. Okay, so these three right here, they're going to be the GI stuff, which is why they're a little out of order compared to the rest of these. So T5 to T9 will be upper GI. What does that mean? It's going to be the lower esophagus all the way down to the proximal first half of the duodenum, and it also includes accessory organs for digestion, so pancreas, gallbladder, liver. T10 to T11 and T12 to L2. So T10 to T11 will be the mid-GI. Crazy, right? So that'll start where this one left off, and it will go to the proximal 2/3 of the transverse colon. And then you have the lower GI. So that one will be the distal 1/3 of the T colon all the way to the rectum. Good old rectum. Then for T10, you're going to have the adrenal medulla. And then for T12, that's the appendix. I just like to do them together because they're the only two that have just one level. And I've found that they tend to be tested because of that. That's how they stand out. Okay, so then T10 to T11, the way I remember these three right here, in between T10 and T12, is, okay, we're going to do a Disney reference here. Gaston, sees you, Belle. So Gaston, he's gross, but he's always looking at Belle, right? Beauty and the Beast. So you have Gaston, sees you, Belle. So what do those mean? All right, so we're just going to zoom in for a second. So you're going to have the gonads, which will be the ovaries and the testes. Then U will be for upper ureters, and then kidney, both of them. Okay, and then CU will be for cervix and uterus. And then bell. So that one will be the bladder, erectile tissue, which is the clitoris and the penis, and then the legs. And then we have the appendix. So remember, we put the arms here. Arms, legs. Okay, appendix. And then right here will be the lower ureters. So if you remember, right up there, we have upper ureters. That goes to T10 to T11. How crazy that the lower ureter is going to pick up where that one left off at T12 to L1. Looking for the patterns. And then T12 to L2 will be the prostate. Okay, so now that we have these, there's a few more things I want to add. So for upper GI, remember that that's going to be the celiac ganglion. And then mid-GI will be superior mesenteric ganglion. And then lower GI will be inferior mesenteric ganglion. It may seem like common sense, but when you're taking the exam, I've had a few times where I was like, oh, I don't know what it is. And then I'd see that I wrote it ahead of time and just be so grateful that I didn't have to think about it because I already did it when I was still functioning correctly at the beginning of the exam. Okay, so the last part here is putting in the parasympathetic innervation. So that's going to be the vagus and the pelvic splanchnic nerve. So what color should I use here? We use blue for vagus. So one thing is, since the vagus nerve is up at the top of the body, I think it makes a lot of sense on why the top parts of the body are going to be innervated by the vagus. So head and neck all the way down to the mid-GI will all be vagus. So the pattern that I'm about to show you is it's going to be vagus, pelvic splanchnic, nothing. Vagus, pelvic splanchnic, nothing, and then just pelvic splanchnic. So vagus for those, and then pelvic splanchnic. And remember, pelvic splanchnic is S2 to S4. That's really important. They'll ask you questions that are secretly testing if you know that the pelvic splanchnic is what does it by talking about the innervation and that sort of thing. So remember how I said nothing? Well, the nothing is going to happen right here and right here. So those single ones is where I put nothing. But technically, you could argue and say that the appendix is attached to the cecum, so the cecum is part of mid-GI. So you could technically argue and say, that's vagus, but the book I have says it's nothing, so I put it as nothing. But if that's not your option, then just look up here and see whatever corresponds with it. Okay. So we did vagus, pelvic splanchnic, nothing, and then we'll do vagus one last time. The rest will be pelvic splanchnic. So these two right here, pelvic splanchnic, nothing, and then these two right here, pelvic splanchnic. And that is your sympathetic, parasympathetic innervation. And this is really helpful too because the organs tend to, where they're located, correspond to the vertebral level. So for board style questions, when they ask you things that have to do with your sense of where things are located in the body, this is really helpful. So if you use this and some way to remember the different levels and all that for Chapman points, it makes it super logical on where things are so that you can easily or quickly, hopefully, put 2 and 2 together when they're asking you a very complicated, convoluted sentence like the one I just said. Okay, good luck.